I grew up here in Central Phoenix. I've lived in Arizona all but 3 years of my life, and in the Phoenix area all but 7 years of my life. And growing up in Central Phoenix, there wasn't a lot to do, and so what we did was we played sports. Me and the other boys in the neighborhood, 8, 10, 12 years old, we played sports all the time, and so it really wasn't complicated. We played everything, really. We played all the different games, but we played baseball at the dirt lot by the canal. We played football in the front yard, running around just playing football in front. We played basketball in the driveways because everybody had a hoop in the driveway. And that's how we spent our time. And in our minds, you got to understand, we were playing at Yankee Stadium. We were playing in the Madhouse at McDowell. I mean, we were in these wonderful places, but the reality of it was, they were less than perfect, and we had to create a few, ground rules. And so, for example, if the basketball hit the side fence, that was considered out of bounds. Like everybody knew it. Oh, it touched the fence, it's out of bounds. Everybody knew that. But on the dirt lot, the sand lot, if the ball hit the canal bank, that was still a fair ball. You had to play that as though it was a fair ball. And then my favorite was when we played football. If the ball hit the tree branch, because you kicked it, punted it, threw it, whatever, and it hit the tree branch, that was a do-over. Everybody just knew that. It's like as soon as the ball hit the branch, like everybody yelled do over, and we started all over again, ran the play again. And that was most of my free time between the ages of 8 and 12, was playing these games in the yard. But now that I think about it, I didn't realize at 10 years old how great it would be to be able to have something happen in your life and just go, do over. Like, okay, didn't happen. I just get to do it over. I don't have to count that one. That one wasn't real. We don't have to do that. We can start all over again. And I don't want to start off in a negative place. But for you, first of all, don't say anything out loud. Do not raise your hand. Do not nudge anyone. Just look straight ahead and everything play out right up here, okay? If you had a chance to have a life do-over, what would it be? What mistake would you unmake? What financial decision would you handle differently? What parenting choice would you maybe take a different route? What relationship blunder? Like, if you had one chance and you can't do the genie thing, well, I would undo that everything I've ever wanted to undo and I get unlimited wishes. No. If you could have one do-over, what would it be? How nice would it be to have that in your back pocket? I got this do-over that I can use whenever things get really, really bad. Now, I know it's just semantics, so I get it. It's just kind of playing with words. But I always like the idea of fresh start better than do-over. Because do-over implies you got to go back and do it again. Like it failed, and there's no guarantee that it won't fail again, and you just got to keep doing it over. But for some reason, that feels like it's more pointed towards the past, where a fresh start, that feels more future-oriented, right? Doesn't it? That feels like something new, something different. I can go in a completely different direction. I don't have to do it over. I can do better. I can do differently. At the end of the day, it probably is just word games. But I always love the idea of a fresh start more than the idea of a do-over. But it all appeals to the same thing that all of us have. All of us have this kind of rolling around in our head and our hearts. Is there a way? Is there a way to start again? Is there a way to do it over? Is there a way to get a second chance? Because there is nobody that doesn't have somewhere in their life where they would like to apply that idea. And beginning again is something that God created. And the reason we love it so much is because beginning again erases bad endings. We've been talking about this all throughout our series, and we're going to continue to talk about it. This idea of getting to begin again, it kind of erases the bad ending, doesn't it? It puts that in the rear view mirror, and it allows you to move forward. And that's kind of the uncomfortable truth. As much as we love fresh starts and second chances and do-overs, as much as we love that, it means what? Something's gone wrong, right? You don't need a do-over. You don't need a second chance. You don't need a fresh start if everything is going the way it's supposed to. What happened is somebody made a mistake. I made a mistake. Somebody around me made a mistake, or the world made a mistake, whatever it might be, and now we have to try to figure it out and move forward. But like I said, the most redeeming fact about all this is second chances, fresh starts, these are God's idea. And if you've got a Bible today, we're going to be in Genesis chapter 6, and I encourage you to find that. And we're going to look at several different parts of this long story of perhaps the biggest fresh start ever in the history of people. Like, this was the biggest one. And it revolves around the life of a man named Noah. And in Noah's life, he encounters God, and God has an encounter with him, and God makes a decision about a fresh start that honestly nobody saw coming. Nobody was planning on. Nobody would have predicted this thing that happened. And for some of you, many of you, probably most of you, you hear the word Noah and beginnings, and you're like, oh, I know this one. You know, I know, I've seen this episode, right? I'm familiar with this. And maybe you are. But I want to invite you in today to take a little bit of a different look at this story, this account of what God did and how he brought a fresh start into the life of Noah. Because I don't know if you've ever thought about this. These are things I think about. What is God's perspective? Like, I know my life and my world and what I think about the people around me, and occasionally I get an opportunity to hear from other people about what they think about me too, you know, and it's always wonderful. But have you ever had that sense of, well, what does God think? I mean, what does his perspective look like? In Genesis 6, we get God's perspective. You see, all throughout creation, everything he had done, God said he did something, he says it was good. He did something else, he says it was good. He does another thing, he says it's good. But by the time we get to Genesis 6, that answer has changed. God's perspective isn't necessarily that everything he is seeing is good anymore. So let's look at this. Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, that every inclination of the thought of the human heart was only evil all the time. And the Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. This is God's perspective. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals and the birds and the creatures that moved along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Stop there for just a second. We'll pick it up here in just a moment. So Noah was different. We get that right out of the gate. God sees the world. He sees what's going on, and then he sees Noah, and he's like, one of these is not like the other, right? You remember that old little game we played as kids? He's like, Noah's not like everybody else, and everybody else is not like Noah. There's something different here. But what was really, I don't know, kind of astounding for me in reading that was that word regret. God regretted. And it kind of made me back up, and I was like, did God make a mistake? Like, what's he saying? Like, I shouldn't have done that in the first place? I mean, if God's making mistakes, that kind of creates other problems, right? Like, we don't want to think of God as being able to make mistakes. So what's going on here? And you start poking around a little bit, and you start to understand this, and it's something that every single one of us can identify with. This word regret, where it really comes into play, is just like you, when you've had, if you're a parent or a grandparent, or you've got a close friend, or you're a brother or a sister, somebody in your life starts making decisions that you know those decisions are going to hurt them. And not only is it going to hurt them, it's going to hurt other people. And as they're making these decisions, you feel a sense of regret. Not, oh, I wish they were never born, or oh, I wish they were never part of my life. You feel a sense of regret for them. Oh, please don't do that. Please don't make that decision. Please don't go that way. This is going to hurt you, and it's going to hurt other people. And that is God's perspective. God didn't make a mistake. He was feeling deep pain in a sorrowful heart. It wasn't that God made a mistake. No. He was hurt by sin. And I think sometimes, and maybe this isn't you're probably smarter than me, but when I was younger especially, I used to think of sin, and I think of God being upset or hurt about it. I used to think of it this way, that God's mad that I didn't do what he said. That he's kind of like an angry dad, right? Like, you didn't do what I said, and now you're going to pay for it. Like, that's not at all why God is upset by sin. You want to know God's perspective on sin? And here's where this really hits home. It's kind of interesting when you read about other people's sin. It gets really interesting when you start thinking about your own, right? You know why God hates sin? Because it hurts you. That's why he hates it. Just like a dad that sees his son or daughter going down the wrong track and making mistakes and hurting themselves and hurting other people. You hate that. God, our Father, is the same way. That's his perspective when it comes to sin. So he looks around and everything is going haywire. Everybody is hurting themselves and hurting each other. And it troubles him. So much so that he says, I got to do something about this. We're going to have to start over again. Look at verse 9. It says, this is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time. He walked faithfully with God. He had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and full of violence. We just read about that. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. And God said to Noah, I am going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy them and the earth. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood, make rooms in it, and coat it with pitch inside and out. Just stop there for just a second. He tells Noah what we just talked about. All they're doing is hurting themselves and hurting each other, and they're violent and they're corrupt. This is a bad situation, Noah, but I see you and I see that you're different, and I want to make a fresh start with you, Noah. And he makes, we don't know it just yet, but because we are on the other side of this story, God ends up making a promise, a covenant with Noah, stronger than a contract. And he says, Noah, I am going to start fresh with you and your family. And we're going to do it in a way that nobody saw coming. We are going to build an ark, and we are going to do something unseen and unheard of. Now, like I said, I know you know the story of Noah and the ark. Now, here's the problem. I don't know if problem's the right word, but most of the time, when we think of Noah and the ark, we think of like these kind of little fun cartoon animals, right? You know, and I get it because little kids in their cribs and babies, and we tell the story to little kids, and we have this, you know, look, the giraffe is poking up above the ceiling, and the birds flying around, you know. It looks like cereal. It's like on a cereal box. And we think of Noah and the ark as this story, right? It's kind of a fairy tale. It's a kid's story. The reality was much different. It probably took years to build this thing. And it was more of a floating box. It was a monstrous kind of vessel that would be able to hold and withstand everything. And you see somebody's conception of what it looks like. And then here's a little giraffe kind of poking up. You know, it's like, all of a sudden the giraffe's not so big. It probably looked more like something like that based on how it's described in here. And it's so interesting to kind of get lost thinking about the ark and the flood and the rain and the animals and how'd they do this and how'd they do that. And hey, I get it. I do the same thing. But sometimes if we're not careful, we lose the point of the story. The point of the story is that God saves. And God wants to do a fresh start. And that though sin hurts him, he is always willing to start again. And here's where your life intersects this story. You have sinned, and you have hurt God, and you have hurt yourself, and you have hurt other people. And God looks at you, and he is not looking at you saying, away with you. He's looking at you and saying, I want to save you. I want to start fresh with you. That is the core of this story of Noah and the ark. And Noah does what God says. It's a pretty familiar refrain throughout this whole story of Noah consistently doing whatever God told him to do. And again, while we tend to think of the ark and the animals and it kind of sounds fun and all the stuff, this wasn't a, like, you know, put in a hard week and you can build it, you know. This was a several year project. And I am sure as Noah is slaving away and building this thing and working in the sun and adding another deck and doing another thing and all this stuff over and over and over, there had to be moments where he's like, really? Like, what are we doing here? Because this seems like a lot. But God had told him, it's going to rain. There's going to be a flood. I'm going to send you the animals. And I'm going to save you. So Noah didn't have all the answers. But he did know what God had told him and what God had said. He said, you can have a fresh start. And that's skipping ahead a little bit. We're going to come back to that. But Noah starts working on this project. He does what God asked him to do. His whole family, this is all they do for years. And then finally, flip over to chapter 7. If you've got a Bible or if you got it on your phone, just click over. Chapter 7, verse 11. It says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the second month, on that day, all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of heaven were opened, and rain fell on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. And on that very day, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, together with their wives and the wives of his 3 sons, entered the ark. They had with them every wild animal according to its kind, all the livestock according to its kind, every creature that moves along the ground according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, everything with wings. Pairs of all the creatures that have the breath of life in them came to Noah and entered the ark. And the animals going in were male and female of every living thing, as God had commanded them. And then the Lord shut him in. For 40 days, the flood kept coming on the earth, and as the water increased, they lifted the ark high above the earth, and the waters rose, and they increased greatly, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. Again, I know there's a good chance that you know at least some of the story. And I try to put myself in Noah's shoes and see things from Noah's perspective a little bit. Like I said, he had to have some questions. he had to have some doubts about what God had said as he's living this out, as he's trying to do what God told him to do. And so many of you have been in that spot too. I'm trying to do what God said, but it's not making sense. I don't really understand this. The animals, the rain, all the stuff. He had questions, I'm sure, just like you have questions. You have questions about what's going on in your life, and then you come to church and you hear about Noah's Ark, and the reality is some of you have questions about that even. Like, come on, a boat with all the animals, like, how does that even work? How do you do that? Like, it sounds kind of like a kid's story. It's one of those kind of things you tell people to, kind of put a moral of the story is, and it's going to be a cartoon like we talked about. You're not even sure, do I even really believe this happened? And I would tell you a couple of things. One, I would tell you that almost every ancient civilization has a flood story as part of its origins. And you could say, well, that's just because they all talk to each other and they all had it in common. That's possible. Or it could be that the reason that all these ancient civilizations have a flood story is because there was a flood. Right? Like it could be, couldn't it? Yeah? Geologists will tell you, most of them have no problem saying, yeah, if you look at the fossil record, there was some massive flooding. They argue about when and why and where and all those other things, but yeah, there was flood. Yeah, absolutely. You see, just because we don't have the science and technology to be able to prove something, that doesn't mean it didn't happen. And before you think I'm anti-science or anything like that, no, not at all. It's just, I know that there's things that we take for granted today that 100 years ago or 200 years ago, people had no idea about. Nobody believed it. Nobody had discovered it. Nobody had thought about it because they just didn't have the ability to do it. Just because we don't have the ability to prove the flood at the moment doesn't mean it didn't happen. And for those of you that follow Jesus, in Matthew 24, Jesus refers to Noah and the flood as historical things that happened. Like he didn't have any question about it. So before you throw it away as an easy, weird kind of kid story, you may want to be careful. You may want to rethink that. Because for a lot of people, it was a very real story. So there's a lot of speculation about it. How did it work? What happened? All that other stuff. But again, going back to Noah's perspective, he's not speculating. This is his life. Right? The chaos of it, the mundaneness of it, all the stuff, all the animals, the boat, the whole thing. This is his life. And again, I think so many of us can identify with that. It's great for people on the outside to ask questions and say things and have their own opinions about what we're doing, but the reality is it's your life. That's your primary focus. What is God doing? What is God saying to me? This is my life. Even if it's chaotic, this is my life. One of the things I love about this description, I'll be honest, I don't do this too much. The Hebrew, the English translation of the Hebrew of this little area is not great. And it's not that it's wrong, it's just that it doesn't convey the essence behind it. It talks about God shutting him in the ark. The best example I can find is the language is actually reminiscent of a father carrying their young child and putting him in bed. This wasn't get in the ark, slam the door. This was a father carrying their precious child, putting him in bed and tucking him in. I love you. Go to sleep. That's the language behind it when it says that God put him in the ark and shut him in the ark. So amongst all the chaos is all around, but the Father is caring for those he saves. Again, that means so much to me, and hopefully to you too. In the chaos of your life, there may be chaos all around, but your Heavenly Father is more than willing and more than able to care for those that he saves, for those that are following him, for those that he's promised to love and care for. And this is exactly where Noah is. He and his family and the animals put in this ark like a father putting his kid to bed. But there's also judgment. Look at verse 23, chapter 7, verse 23. And let it hit you. This is heavy. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. People, animals, creatures that moved along the ground, the birds were wiped from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. I don't know about you, but you hear that, you read that. I mean, it doesn't feel right to cheer for it. Like, hey, look what God did. Wait, no. I had friends and neighbors, and it feels a little bold, right, to question God. How dare you? Why would you do something? That's awful. If that's who you are, then I don't know if I'm comfortable with that either. I mean, what are you doing? There's a God that's, tucking his kids into bed, and then he's wiping out everything. How does that even work? The answer to that is in chapter 8, verse 15. What is God doing? At this point, the flood is dissipated. The waters have gone down. And God is ready for Noah to come back out. Verse 15, it says, God said to Noah, come out of the ark, you, your wife, your sons, and their wives. Bring out every kind of living creature that's with you, the birds, the animals, and the creatures that move on the ground, so they can multiply on the earth and be fruitful and increase in number on it. So Noah came out together with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives, and all the animals and creatures that move along the ground, and the birds and everything that moves on the land came out of the ark, one kind after another. And again, you read that and you might think, okay, everybody got out of the boat. What's the big deal? This is the fresh start. All the things, all the corruption, all the violence, all the wickedness, all the stains, all the dirt, all the stuff has been washed away. And by the way, God did that at his cost. When we look at that and say, how could God do something like that? Sometimes we forget God is the one that created all those things. God is the one that had relationships with all those people. God is the one that created all those animals. He paid the cost of this far more dearly than anybody else did. He says, Noah, now it's time. We're going to start fresh, and I want you to be part of creation again. Come, be fruitful, multiply. We're starting over, Noah. We got a fresh start. All the ugly, all the things, all the wrong, God is bringing a fresh start, and he is beginning again. And again, I can't help it. I know I keep going back to our story and how it interacts with this and how it intersects with this. He offers the same thing to us. He's glad to have us participate in a fresh start. God would rather love you than judge you. He would much rather start fresh with you. And so we see this story from so many angles. We see so many things are happening. It takes years for this to happen. But in the heart of it, in the heart of this encounter and this experience is your story. A desire that you have for the do-over, for the fresh start, for the second chance. It's the same one we see mirrored in this story. And the beauty of it is we don't have to wait for another ark or another flood or something like that. God tells us that we can have a fresh start. And it comes out of 2 Corinthians 5:17. And it beautifully parallels all of this. When we become followers of Jesus, something in us changes and we get that fresh start. We get that second chance. He talks about it. Put that verse up on 2 Corinthians 17. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, a new creation has come. The old is gone. All the ugly, all the dark, all the corrupt, all the pain, all the stuff washed away. The new, the fresh start, the second chance is here. See, God provided the ark. God paid the cost again. This time not with creation, but the life of his very own son. He paid the cost to start fresh all over again. And I love how the Bible is so consistent. It picks this theme up. Peter, one of Jesus' closest followers, in 1 Peter, he talks about this, and he says that the flood, in essence, was the baptism of the earth. And it makes so much sense. If you've not been here, I can explain it very quickly. When we baptize someone becomes a follower of Jesus, and we baptize them. And there's so many things that are going on, but one of the things that's going on is they lay back in the water, and that symbolizes something very important. The old life is gone, dead, and buried. We're done with that. And the water's not magic. Honestly, it comes out of the tap back here. But, there's nothing crazy about the water. But what it symbolizes is that old life is gone. It's washed away. And when they come back out of the water, it's a new life. It's a fresh start. You get to begin again. the bad endings are erased. God pays the price for it, and he gives it to us. It's an incredible gift. Absolutely. Absolutely. We've looked at so many different perspectives. We've seen God's perspective. There's judgment, and when it's called for and when it has to happen, he does it, but he loves and he saves. That's his heart, because sin hurts you and it hurts people around you and it hurts him. But he is willing to pay the cost to bring a fresh start. And then you see Noah's perspective. Confused, not always sure, there are a lot of questions about what's going on, and a long obedience in the same direction. This wasn't a quick thing. But that refrain over and over and over, if you read the story, and I hope you will, go home and read this, chapter 6, 7, and 8. It'll take you 15 minutes, but it'll completely change the way you see the world. Over and over and over, it says, and Noah did what God commanded. And Noah did what God told him. Over and over and over. And that is such a great little principle for us. Doing what God commands includes me. Doing what God commands includes me in what God has planned. Do you want to know what God's plan for your life is? If you'll do what he commands, you will be included in that plan. That was Noah. I mean, he just kept doing what God said, and God kept including him and bringing him along, caring for him, saving him, letting him start fresh. So that's God's perspective. That's Noah's perspective. What about your perspective? You remember earlier I asked you, if you could have a do-over, what would it be? What would it look like? Let me ask you a better question. If you could have a fresh start, a complete life reset, where all the old things, all the bad moments, all the shame, the guilt, the dirt, the violence, whether it was real or in your head, the corruption, the twisted thoughts, all the stuff that we all carry. So come on, let's not play like anybody is doing fine on their own, because we're not. If there was a way to put all that away, to literally kill all that and start fresh, wouldn't you want it? Wouldn't you want it? I mean, I don't know anybody that wouldn't. I don't know why you wouldn't. And this isn't some mystical pie-in-the-sky religious thing. This is as clear as God can make it. I will pay the price. I will send my son. He will pay the price of your sin. You can die to all that old stuff and all that junk. You can put it away. You can wash it off like taking a shower. You can get away from it. You can start fresh. You know, we all believe in something. Some of us believe in making a lot of money. That's how I'm going to have a good life. Some of us believe in staying healthy. I'm going to eat careful, and I'm going to exercise. I'm going to live 5 years longer than everybody else. Woohoo, you go. There's all this stuff. I always believe in something. Like I'm going to love my family. And don't get me wrong, nothing wrong with any of those things. They're all temporary. None of them, pardon the pun, outlast the flood. What if you believed in something that outlived all of it? A fresh start. You see, the Bible tells us, it's so clear that anyone, it doesn't have to just be Noah, that God provides the ark, that God pays the price. So anyone who believes that Jesus is the Son of God, that he died and was resurrected to cover the cost of your sins. If you believe that in your heart and you confess with your mouth that he is now my leader, he is my Lord, my life is oriented around following him, you will be saved. You will be carried by a father with the same care that he carries his young child. You will be saved by the same God that can preserve pairs of animals and a family in an ark when everything else is destroyed. You will get a fresh start and a new life. And it's so much more than just not being judged. That's just the starting place. It is a do-over, a second chance, a fresh start. And if that's what you need, if that's where you're at today, I can't encourage you enough. You're going to believe in something, you might as well believe in what's real. You might as well believe in something that lasts beyond the moment. Maybe you need to make the decision to believe and follow Jesus, to get that second chance. And I know many of you have done that, and I am so thankful for that. And if that's where you're at, we're going to talk in just a minute about how you can respond. But there's one more piece to this. I love how Peter talked about the flood as a baptism. And baptism, as I know a lot of churches teach a lot of different things, baptism is very, very simple. It is, I've made a decision to follow Jesus, so I got baptized because I wanted everybody to see that I'm following Jesus. It is me going public, right? It is wearing the wedding ring. It is making the commitment. It is the way that I give witness or testimony to the fact that my life has changed. I am starting fresh. I am starting new. And that's why I'm getting baptized. And I would ask you, since we're talking about floods and baptism, have you done that? Because if you haven't, you need to, and here's why. Not so that as a church we can clap, although we will. Not so that you can have an emotional experience, although you probably would. But because it's a spiritual mile marker in your life. It is one of those moments when it happens that you look back on. And when you're celebrating and worshiping and excited about the fresh start that God has, you look back on it with joy. And when you're struggling and you're hurting and you're not sure what's going on, you look back on it and it gives you a sense of security that I am saved. My Father does love me. He is protecting me. He is with me. It becomes a spiritual mile marker for you. And when you do it with us as a church family, it encourages us. Because the rest of us that have that same story, it causes us again to worship God. It causes us again to celebrate the second chance and the fresh start that we've received. It causes us again to remember that we have been saved by our loving Father. And yet there's still more. Because so many times there's somebody that sees you get baptized. And God uses that as a lever to help them move forward too. Because I saw them. Because they were brave, because they were obedient, because they did what God said. It's encouraging me to do what God has said and take that next step. You see, as a church, we're loved by our Father. We're saved by our Father. We are protected by our Father. And we have a fresh start because of our Father. I don't want you to miss it. I don't want you to miss out on that. And so I want to give you something very, very simple to do. If you need to talk about this, pray about this, sort through this, schedule a baptism. We're going to be baptizing, I hope, every Sunday in August. So, that part's easy. Would you do us a favor and just share with us that you want to take the next step? That you're ready to move forward? And you can do that in a lot of ways. If you're here in person, you can stop by on your way out. You can check us out at the Connect Center, fill out a card. Man, we'll take care of all of it. We'll pray with you. We'll talk to you. We'll do whatever we need to do. If you're online, you can simply type the word next steps in the comments. We'll follow up. We'll take care of that. If you're one of those folks, and I know because I'm like that too, well, I don't really want to talk to anybody. Great. You can text the word next to this number. We're going to leave that up there for a second. If you want to get your phone out, you can get it out right now. You got permission. Get your phone out. If this is something you need to do, you want to take this step, text the word next to 623-323-9202. And I'll tell you what will happen. We'll simply send you a form. And that form will just ask you some basic info. What's your name? And how is God leading you? What do you want to do next? How can we help you? It's so simple. You can fill out a card. You can stop by the center. You can type in the comments. You can text to next. Whatever you do, though, if God is calling you to take another step, don't ignore it. Don't brush it off. Do like Noah. Just do what God commands you to do because you want to be included what God has planned for you. You don't want to miss it. I want to pray with you. Close your eyes just a moment. Father, the story is inspiring. It's shocking. It gives us a lot of answers, and it also creates a lot of questions. But right in the middle of all of it, it's not about the animals. It's not about the boat. It's not about who shoveled the poo. It's not about any of that stuff. It's about a Father that loves and saves and gives fresh starts. So, Father, for everyone here that has experienced that, this is a moment of joy and worship for us. For everyone here that has not experienced that, Father, I pray that you'd give them courage to respond to what you're calling them to. That for some, it would become the day that they trusted you. They finally understood and believed. For others, those that said, I'm going to take the next step. I'm going to be baptized. I'm going to move forward in my faith, in my relationship with Jesus. Father, give us courage. Thank you for giving us wisdom. Thank you for speaking to us today. Help us to learn how to trust the Father that loves, that saves, and that lets us start again. In Jesus' name.